Hello everybody. Today we are going to talk about the American Revolution. In this video, we'll see the causes of the American Revolution, go through a detailed timeline, and discuss the consequences. So let's start our video. First, we'll discuss the causes. There were many causes of the American Revolution, but we'll discuss the three major causes, which are the French-Indian War, which caused a great debt on the ruler. The colonies were greatly taxed, and the Boston Massacre angered the people. Now let's go through a detailed timeline. 1754 to 1763, French and Indian War. We are talking about the American phase of the worldwide 9 Years' War, fought between France and Great Britain from 1754 to 1763. The European phase was the 7 Years' War, which was from 1756 to 1763. The Treaty of Paris of 1763 ended the French and Indian War. As a result of the war, France ceded all of its North American possessions to the east of Mississippi River to Britain. The costs of war contributed to the British government's decision to impose new taxes on its American colonies. March 22nd, 1765, Stamp Act. Like the Sugar Act, which happened in 1764, the Stamp Act was imposed to provide increased revenues to meet the cost of defending the enlarged British Empire. It was one of the first British parliamentary attempts to raise revenue through direct taxation on a wide variety of colonial transactions, including legal writs, newspaper advertisements, and ship bills of lading. Enraged colonists nullified the Stamp Act through outright refusal to use stamps, as well as by riots, stamp burning, and intimidation of colonial stamp distributors. June 15 to July 2nd, 1767, Townshend Act. A series of 4 acts, the Townshend Act was passed by British Parliament in an attempt to assert what it is considered to be its historic right to exert authority over the colonies through suspension of recalcitrant representative assembly and through strict provision for collection of revenue duties. The acts were resisted everywhere with verbal agitation and physical violence, deliberate evasion of duties, renewed non-importation agreements among merchants, and overt acts of hostility towards British informant agents, especially in Boston. In response, in October 1768, Parliament dispatched 2 regiments of British Army to Boston. March 5, 1770, Boston Massacre. In Boston, a small British Army detachment was threatened by a mob harassment, opened fire and killed 5 people, an incident soon known as the Boston Massacre. The soldiers were charged with murder and were given civilian trial, in which John Adams conducted a successful defense. December 16, 1773, Boston Tea Party. Protesting both a tax on tea, taxation without representation, and perceived monopoly of East India Company, a party of Bostonians thinly disguised as Mohawk people boarded ships at anchor and dumped some of 10,000 pounds worth of tea into the harbor, an event popularly known as Boston Tea Party. March to June 1774, Intolerable Act. In retaliation for colonial resistance to British rule during the winter of 1773 to 74, the British Parliament enacted 4 measures that became known as Intolerable or Coercive Acts: the Boston Ports Act, Massachusetts Government Act, Administration of Justice Act, and Quartering Act. Rather than the intimidating Massachusetts and the isolating it from other colonies, the oppressive acts became the justification for convening the First Continental Congress later in 1774. September 5, 1774. First Continental Congress convened. Caused by committees of correspondence in response to intolerable acts, the First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. 56 delegates represented all the colonies except Georgia. March 23, 1775. Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. Convinced that the war with Great Britain was inevitable, Virginian Patrick Henry defended strong resolution for equipping the Virginia military for fighting against the British in fiery speech in Richmond Church with famous words, "I know not what courses may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." April 18 and 19, 1775. Fall Rivers, White, and the Battle of Lexington and Concord. On the night of April 18, 1775, Fall River rose from the Charlestown to Lexington, both in Massachusetts, to warn the British were marching from Boston to seize the colonial armory to Concord. En route, the British force of 700 men was met on Lexington Green by 77 local minutemen and others. It is unclear who fired the first shot, but it sparked a skirmish that left 8 Americans dead. At Concord, the British were met by hundreds of militiamen. Outnumbered and running low on ammunition, the British columns were forced to retire to Boston. On this return march, American snipers took a deadly toll on the British. Total losses in Battle of Lexington and Concord numbered 273 British and more than 90 Americans. June 17, 1775. Battle of Bunker Hill. Beech Hill in Charlestown was primary locus of combat in misnamed Battle of Bunker Hill, which was part of American siege of British-held Boston. Some 2,300 British troops eventually cleared the hill and entrenched Americans, but at the cost of more than 40% of assault force. The battle was moral victory for Americans. January 1776. Thomas Paine's Common Sense published. In late 1775, the colonial conflict with the British still looked like a civil war, not a war aiming to separate nations. However, the publication of Thomas Paine's irrelevant pamphlet, Common Sense, abruptly put independence on agenda. Paine's 50-page pamphlet, couched in elegant direct language, sold more than 10 lakh copies within a few months, more than other single publications. Common Sense paved the way for a Declaration of Independence. July 4, 1776. Declaration of Independence adopted. After the Congress recommended that the colonies form their own government, the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson and revised in committee. On July 2nd, the Congress voted for independence. On July 4th, it adopted the Declaration of Independence. September 22nd, 1776. Nathaniel Hale executed. On September 24th, 1776, having penetrated the British lines on Long Island to obtain information, American captain Nathaniel Hale was captured by British. He was hanged without trial the next day. Before his death, Hale is thought to have said, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country," a remark similar to one in the play Cato by Joseph Addison. December 25 and 26, 1776. Washington crosses the Delaware. Having been forced to abandon New York City and driven across New Jersey by British, George Washington and the Continental Army struck behind Christmas on the night by stealthily crossing the ice-strewn Delaware River, surprising the Hessian garrison at Trenton at dawn and taking some 900 prisoners. The American triumph at Trenton and in the Battle of Princeton, January 3, 1777, rose the new country and kept the struggle for independence alive. October 17, 1777, Burgoyne surrenders at Saratoga. Moving south from Canada in summer 1777, a British force under General John Burgoyne captured Fort Ticonderoga on July 5th, before losing decisively at Bennington, Vermont, August 16, and Bemis Heights, New York, on October 7th. His force depleted, Burgoyne surrendered at Saratoga. December 19, 1777 to June 19, 1778, Washington winters at Valley Forge. Following failures at the Battle of Brandywine and Germantown, Washington and 11,000 regulars took up winter quarters at Valley Forge, 22 miles, that is 35 kilometers, northwest of the British-occupied Philadelphia. Although its ranks were decimated by rampant disease, semi-starvation, and bitter colds, the reorganized Continental Army emerged the following June as a well-disciplined and efficient fighting force. February 6, 1778, France and the United States formed an alliance. The French had secretly furnished financial and material aid to the Americans since 1776, but with the signing of Paris of the Treaty of Amity and Commerce and the Treaty of Alliance, the Franco-American alliance was formalized. France began preparing fleets and armies to enter the fight, but did not formally declare war on Britain until June 1778. September 23, 1779, John Paul Jones, I have not yet begun to fight. The U.S. battleship, the Bonhomme Richard, was getting the worst of its battle with the British vessel HMS Serapis of Flambeau Head, England, when the American commander John Paul Jones refused to surrender, proclaiming, I have not even begun to fight. Jones ultimately triumphed, but he lost his ship in the process. September 1780, Benedict Arnold turned traitor. Having fought valiantly in number of battles earlier in the war, American General Benedict Arnold conspired with British to surrender the fort at West Point, New York, that he commanded. When John Andrew, an British army officer with whom Arnold had negotiated, was hanged as a spy after he was captured and the plot revealed, Arnold took sanctuary with the British. 1st March 1781, Articles of Confederation ratified. The Articles of Confederation, a plan of government organization that served as a bridge between the initial governments by the Continental Congress and the federal government provided under the U.S. Constitution of 1787, were written in 1776 to 77 and adopted by Congress on November 15, 1777. However, the article was not fully ratified by the states until March 1, 1781. September to October 1781, Siege of Yorktown. After winning a costly victory at Guilford Courthouse, North Carolina, on March 15, 1781, Lord Cornwallis entered Virginia to join other British forces there, setting up a base at Yorktown. Washington's army and the force under the French Count of Fontainebleau placed Yorktown under siege, and Cornwallis surrendered his army of more than 7,000 men on October 19, 1781. September 3rd, 1783. Treaty of Paris ends the war. After the British defeated at Yorktown, the land battles in America largely died out, but the fighting continued at sea, chiefly between British and America's European allies, which came to include Spain and Netherlands. The military verdict to North America was reflected in the preliminary Anglo-American Peace Treaty of 1782, which was included in Treaty of Paris of 1783. By its terms, Britain recognized the independence of U.S. with generous boundaries including the Mississippi River on the west. Britain retained Canada, but ceded East and West Florida to Spain. Now, let's discuss the consequences. The main four consequences were that America became democratic and its constitution was formed. America started rising. The Industrial Revolution reached America and it got economically strong due to it in the future. Decolonization started in America and it became an inspiration for the people of Afro-Asian regions. Thank you for watching. Bye.